Well, thanks for joining everyone tonight. I am excited to get to talk about a topic that I think is really hot right now. A lot of people are looking to get into it. We're going to be talking about short-term rentals. And so there are a couple of things that are included within short-term rentals, and that includes Airbnbs and short-term rentals in general, and then rental arbitrage. So we'll talk about all three of those different terms tonight. Hopefully you'll get some questions answered, and as always, learn more about the different types of real estate investing strategies so that you can best discern which one you might want to put all of your eggs in one basket, to put it lightly. So with that, tonight we'll talk about some of the strategy to short-term rentals, what that business might look like, what that business scaled might look like, and the pros and cons. Let's go ahead and get started with some of our slides. So all of our different topics. Tonight's our last topic with Airbnbs and short-term rentals. So really excited. If you haven't been able to see the others, the intro has an overview of all of the different strategies. Week 2 was BRRRR method, long-term rentals. Then we had multifamily and commercial, fix and flips, flipping or whatever. And then now we have our Airbnb and short-term rental. So if you want to go back, you can go back and watch them on YouTube. So here is my YouTube channel. You can use this QR code to access it. You can subscribe. It's at Gen Z Equity, all one word, or Caroline Ehler to find me. So hi, my name's Caroline Ehler, if you don't already know me, and I am a real estate agent in Virginia, but I ultimately am a real estate investor, and that's where my heart lies, my passion lies. I am actively invested in multifamily right now, which is essentially commercial real estate, and I have 390 GP units and 80 parking spots between 2 deals within my multifamily portfolio. I'm also a Rod Cleave warrior and boardroom member. So those are the mentorship programs I'm in. Follow me on Instagram at Caroline_real estate, where I share a bunch of tips that apply to you if you're just looking to buy a house. So I have like realtor tips, but I also have investment tips on there that are really good to look at, including some videos, but also a lot of posts that you can read. And then that QR code has my contact information if you want to maybe work with me, or if you want to meet up with me one-on-one, or you can contact me or join my newsletter. So if you're local to the area, you can join the local real estate newsletter, but I also have an investor newsletter if you'd like to join that as well. All right, and then we just talked about the YouTube. So today I wanted to start off just by asking if anyone had any specific questions. You can throw them in the chat. We'll make sure to answer them. I don't have a guest speaker tonight. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out, but that's okay because we have a ton to talk about anyway. So we'll talk about short-term rentals and the difference between short-term rentals, long-term rentals, and how that also differs from an Airbnb. And then some of the strategy, pros and cons, and we'll end with a Q&A. All right, so let's get into it. So we have short-term rentals, and that is different from long-term rentals. So long-term rentals are included, the BRRRR method is included within long-term rentals. And that's definitely different from short-term rentals. Of course, it's different because of the duration of the lease. How long are you renting out that home? That is different for a long-term rental. It's usually 6 months to years, right? That's a long-term lease. A short-term lease is something like 3 months. Something under 6 months usually is considered a short-term rental, and over 30 days. Over 30 days, so over a month long would be a short-term rental. That's the term we would use. We also, the broader term, short-term rentals, Airbnb will fall under it. even though it's usually under 30 days. But I want to make that distinction really clear because a lot of times legally, counties make a distinction. So if a county is making a distinction between an Airbnb and a short-term rental, that's usually because they're considering Airbnbs under 30-day rentals and short-term rentals over 30 days. They might use a term like a bed and breakfast or something. And these are all different types of classifications. It's really important you look at the laws of the area you're looking in because they're all really, really different. They're all a little hypersensitive right now because a lot of markets are saturated with short-term rentals and Airbnbs. So it's important to not get caught up in after buying something and realizing you can't get the permit for it or it's not legal in your jurisdiction. So that's something to pay attention to, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But keeping it high level just for now, those are the that's the differentiation between the two. And then there's also something called rental arbitrage that we'll talk about in addition to this, where rental arbitrage would be not owning the property. You would be renting it and then subleasing it as an Airbnb. Super different, very, very different. So sticking to just short-term rentals as a concept, comparing it with something like a long-term rental. A short-term rental, you probably still be purchasing the property. So you're purchasing a property, but you're doing a different strategy when you are renting it out. Maybe you bought a property that's great and you rent it out immediately. Maybe you bought a property that you need to fix up and then you'll rent it out after. That can all change your business model. That can change the amount of capital you're required to utilize for the deal. Maybe the amount of money you raise. If you do have to do a rehab, are you going to bring investors in, etc. So just like long-term rentals can have other investors involved, business partners, whatever you might need to be able to get that deal done. You can do the same for short-term rentals. There are absolutely different ways that you can get involved just as an investor without actually having to manage the property with short-term rentals. I know other people that have used that strategy and have been successful with it. So you don't necessarily have to own the property, even if someone else is buying it, but that's just one of the different strategies you can deploy. So one other thing would be with a short-term rental, you're really thinking, how can I cash flow a lot? And a short-term rental and a long-term rental are different because a long-term rental, you're going to have probably a standard market rate for your renter, and you're going to do it for 12 months. So it's like a year. Maybe you lock in a 2 or 3 year deal with them. But basically, the rent's not really going to go up a lot. And you're going to be able to really, really steadily predict your income. That is one of the pros, is how consistent that check will probably come in with a long-term rental. But a short-term rental can fluctuate a lot. So maybe weeknights you charge less and weekends are more. Let's say it's a beach house. Weekends are probably going to be more. If someone wants Monday to Wednesday, that's going to be cheaper. Maybe you have there's like a nightly minimum or something like that, where you have to stay for 3 nights or something like that to make it worth your time. And prices fluctuate on short-term rentals. So sometimes it will be cheaper to do it one night and more expensive to do the other night. Well, if you end up only booking the cheap nights, you're going to make less money that month. And that is unpredictable, riskier. And it really depends on how good of a deal you found. If you can fill that property up because it's a hot area. And then there's a second layer to this, which is marketing and your listing that you have on Airbnb. How marketable is it? How often are people going to actually book your Airbnb? If you're getting low bookings, you're either overpriced, or maybe you have an ugly listing, or your Airbnb is not cute enough, or something like that. And it's worth, having to, there's more that's going to go into an Airbnb than a long-term rental, for sure. Like, you're going to have to fix probably just as many toilets, if not more, in the short-term rental, while also having to keep it up a lot, clean it, book it, market it, maybe make an Instagram for it. Like, there's so many different things that you'd have to do. So that's something to consider. But what's great about it is you make more money. Typically, you will cash flow more with an Airbnb, simply because if you have 3 of the 4 weekends booked and you have you're like 100, 200 a night. Maybe you have a property that's 300, 400 a night. You can have properties that are $1,000 a night, right? On the weekends. There are so many different opportunities there to cash flow really high. And what's important is if you bought that property, just like a long-term rental, when you buy that property, because you want to maximize your cash flow, you want to make sure that you are going to get the lowest mortgage payment as possible, because that's your biggest expense. If you have the lowest mortgage payment, that'll be a lower monthly expense and letting you profit more when you end up having lower expenses. So it's really something to consider. If you're looking to buy an Airbnb, if you're looking to buy a property and turn it into an Airbnb, you really want to consider buying something that's affordable, buying something that you can put a fat down payment on, because the larger the down payment, the lower the mortgage you're going to have. And that's good for business here. If you can't afford a large down payment, if you're thinking about doing some sort of FHA loan or some, VA loan, first time home buyer stuff, stop, reconsider, okay? Reconsider, because if you're really relying on that 3.5% down, you have to account for the fact that those different loan programs within America require that you live in the property for one full calendar year, 12 months before you ever rent it out. Your loan might even have certain requirements, like you actually have 20% equity in the home before you can rent it out or something like that. That might not happen, but specifically for FHA and VA loans, you can't rent out your property unless you've lived in it for a year. It has to be your primary residence for a year. And if that changes things, if in a year you won't want to rent it out and you're going to keep living in it or something like that because you had already bought it for your primary residence, it's worth considering. It's worth thinking, okay, well, maybe I will rent longer. I won't move out. I won't buy my own house because I'll just wait until I can get a down payment to afford a conventional loan on an actual rental property. The bank considers a rental property different from a primary residence. So as your primary residence, they want to cut you some slack. They're like, yes, if you need a place to live and you can do the 3.5% down, here's a special loan, of FHA loan, and you can utilize that program because you're buying a primary residence. When you're buying an investment property, you're buying a business. The bank knows that. They're like, all right, if you're going to go try and make some money, you better make sure it's not a risky property. We're going to require that it's not risky for us to take on, and we want at least 15% down. If you got a conventional loan, the minimum down for a rental property would be 15% down, at least in Virginia. I think that's standard everywhere. So those are some things to consider if you are looking to purchase a property to make into an Airbnb or a short-term rental. So something like renting by the month, renting by 1 to 2 to 3 months. Maybe you're like, who would do that? Who would rent something for 3 months? There are a lot of strategies there. There are travel nurses. So a lot of times people will do short-term rentals around hospitals because of the need for these hospitals, especially if it's in an area where there aren't hotels. So if there aren't hotels, but there's a huge hospital, that's a great opportunity to offer housing for travel nurses or people that are staying long-term at the hospital. That is really a golden opportunity for opening up a short-term rental. Okay, so let's think about what we have next. Asset classes. Okay, so you're really gonna look for residential homes. They could be a townhouse. It could be a single family home that's a detached home. You could look into accessory dwelling units, ADUs. So maybe you own a home and you have enough land to buy to build an ADU, or you already have an ADU on your property, or maybe you are going to buy a house and you will look for houses that have ADUs. So what is an ADU? It's a second house on the property. Usually it's like an in-law suite or like an extra bedroom or something like that. But what an ADU would be is it specifically has its own like utility. So it will have electricity, it will have water running to it. So you could even rent on your own property right now that you own and rent out the ADU. Keep in mind, most counties in Northern Virginia, like Loudoun County, everything as west as Loudoun County and going way more east toward DC, all of them have laws about ADUs, and all of them have laws about ADUs and Airbnbs, and all of them have laws about Airbnbs. So again, check your laws. What's allowed? What can you build? What are you allowed to get permits for? Can you get a permit for an Airbnb? So I think that brings us to laws. Basically, Airbnbs are tough because a lot of different counties have seen it's changed their real estate. It has changed their hospitality industry. Hotels have been hurt, and real estate, there are a lot of places that won't let you do an Airbnb. Certain counties won't. Certain cities won't. Certain counties and cities might have a lot of restrictions. If they do allow it, they might only allow 30-day and up rentals, so over a month, which would be a short-term rental, but maybe not something that you would want to even use for an Airbnb. Maybe you only want something that people can book for a night, because that usually cash flows pretty well. So a lot of things to consider when you're looking. Another thing to consider is if you're looking at single family homes, you should probably need to find something without an HOA. An HOA usually will never allow an Airbnb. And you're going to have to file for a permit. So it will be public information that your home is an Airbnb. So that's important. You can't really weasel your way out of that. And another thing would be if you're looking to buy a condo or if you're looking to buy an apartment, a lot of times apartments will have their own rules and condos will have their own rules that will or will not allow Airbnbs. So even within the county, you have to look at your own street, at your own apartment building. Does it allow for Airbnbs? That's really important for you to check before you go and buy it. I know people that have bought Airbnbs and they bought it at a condo in a really popular beach area, and they don't allow under 30-day rentals. So now they're stuck with the business model of having to rent it out for 30 days and above over time periods. And they found people, which was fine. But then there were other laws that I don't know. I guess there were a lot of problems. So really check you. And the other thing is if you use a real estate agent, they are not legally bound to check those laws for you. As a fiduciary, they should, to be helpful or to try and at least support you, suggest that you should do the research yourself, but they're not legally bound or liable if you bought property, realized that you can't even Airbnb it, and that was your goal all along. You're on your own. You have to be the person that is going to take ownership over finding out if that's an area that you can Airbnb. All right, let's see what else. So if you're looking to do an Airbnb, a couple tips. Check the market. You got to look for the laws. We just talked about that. Look at the area. Does the area already have successful Airbnbs? If it doesn't, run. If there are successful Airbnbs, great. If it's not super saturated, that's good to know. Consider how well decorated is this Airbnb? How well furnished or how fine of finishes are the Airbnbs in that area? And don't overdo it. There's no reason for you to be putting in marble countertops when everyone has granite in the area. If every listing has granite, don't go spend $1 billion renovating your Airbnb to then not see those returns on that investment you put down, because there's a cap of that market at $300 a night. If you can't break out of that $300 a night, even if you're the nicest Airbnb in the area, you're gonna kick yourself in the butt. You're gonna be really annoyed that you did that. So keep in mind that you're running a business. You got to keep your profit high and your expenses low. Look at around at the comps. You can always look on Airbnb ahead of time before you rent in that area and look at what other Airbnbs are doing. Are they new builds? Are they old and renovated? Are they not renovated? How nice is the furniture? What's considered luxury in that area? What's not? And then another thing would be to look on AirDNA, like DNA, like your genetics, but instead of Airbnb, it's AirDNA. That is an incredibly great open source tool. It's free. Most of it is free. Parts of the features are not free, so you have to pay for it, and it's not cheap to pay for those features, but you don't need those features to be successful at analyzing deals. So AirDNA is a tool online that you can use to plug in a zip code or a specific address and see how those Airbnbs in that area perform. It's awesome. So you can go and literally look at it basically is compiling all of the data from Airbnb's website and saying, here's the average rent, here's the average night occupancy, how many nights is it being rented a month? That's important. If it's 14 a month, that's terrible. That's less than half. You're shooting for 80%. So what is that? Like 22 days probably. That's your goal, is to basically be maximizing your occupancy, maximizing the number of days that you have rented. It's a little risky, but it's really profitable when it does run out very quickly and at max occupancy. And you can check AirDNA and analyze different areas. And I'd really encourage everyone to do that. Even if you're considering anything, any type of real estate investing, go on AirDNA, see how Airbnbs perform in that area. It will actually tell you a lot about that real estate market in general, in my opinion. At some point, if you have enough Airbnbs in one particular area, and that's why it's really important to pick a market that you don't hate initially, because let's say it's a good market, well then keep buying Airbnbs. When you have enough Airbnbs in one area, you can bring in a property manager. Maybe it's too expensive to bring in a property manager for 1, 2, or 3 properties, but if you have 5, 6, 7 more, bringing in a property manager is going to save you so much time handling all of the cleaners and all the bookings and the price fluctuations, and it will really save you. So typically managers take 20 to 30%. It's usually 20 to 25. More expensive areas might be 30%. And that's a good chunk of your profit. So it's really important to account for that in your business model if you're considering using a property manager, because you know you can't manage it yourself. But another reason why Airbnbs are so appealing to so many people, and why a lot of times people use Airbnbs to get into real estate, is because of a couple things. One is that you can automate everything. You can automate most of the process. You can automate your booking pricing that can fluctuate. The computer will do it for you. You can automate messages that get sent to your, what are they called? They're not tenants, like your renters. You can automate all of that. You can have robots talk to them. You can hire virtual assistants for that. You don't need a property manager specifically to do those tasks. But what a property manager will end up doing is they can manage the cleaning. They can manage the emails if people ask questions. They can manage the listing, the pictures, update them, update the property itself, and keep and upkeep. So those are things that a virtual assistant isn't necessarily going to be able to do. And it's also important to consider if you want to hire your own property manager or hire a property management company. And usually people, I've just heard, don't love property management companies because every property manager is different. One property manager might be super hands-on and amazing, and the next property manager from that company might literally visit it once a year. So it's really important to hire based off of the person and not just off of the company or not just off of the concept hire someone that's going to take care of it like your own house. Yeah, super great with these automated processes. I'm going to skip to the next slide because this is the list of software that you could use to run your Airbnb. This is like a very limited list. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of other softwares out there that you can utilize. I already mentioned AirDNA. QuickBooks, pretty standard. Everybody knows that one. But there's PriceLabs, HostAway, Guesty, Turnover, BNB. That's just 4 of, again, dozens of different software that you can use. Go look at the competitors of these different softwares, pick the one that makes sense for you, pick the one that makes sense for your market or area or price range. But those are the ones I've seen experts refer to. I don't know if they were like paid ads or something like that. That's something to consider too, but that's the compiled list I have so far. So yeah, I'll leave that on the screen for a second. Your goal should be to find areas that can charge at least $100 a night. That your goal should be to cash flow about $1,000 a month from the Airbnb. That would be considered successful. And your other goal would be your other benchmark would be to have an occupancy of about 80% a month. So those are just some numbers to stick by. That's like industry standard of what a good Airbnb might be doing. Depends on the market. I mean, some markets that would be terrible, $100 a night. Some markets that would be super expensive. So it's all dependent on where you're looking. Let's see. It's really important that you analyze a bunch of deals in that market before you buy. Analyze 100. And that is a random number, but like the point is analyze as many as you need to in order to determine if it's a good deal before you buy. Don't just buy the first 1 or 2 properties you looked at because that one's pretty and it's in your budget. Doesn't mean it's a good deal. Doesn't mean it's going to Airbnb well. It's really important to think about all those things before you purchase. Look at areas without hotels. We talked about that. How many bedrooms and how many bathrooms would you need in that area to be successful? That would be different for every different area. Do you need a log cabin that can sleep 10? Or do you need an apartment, but it's beachfront, so you need 1 bathroom, 1 bedroom, or you could do a studio even. There are very different reasons as to why you might need a lot of bathrooms, or it's okay that you can get away with buying a house that has 1 bathroom, one bedroom, 2 bathrooms, because you can turn the basement into a bedroom, something like that. What's the average beds and baths for that market, and make sure that you're able to hit it, because your Airbnb might not be as desirable if it's not going to be, a 4-bed, 2-bath, can sleep 8. All right. This is a statistic I pulled off the internet. Don't quote me on this. A sound return on a short-term rental property is anywhere between 8 to 15% or more. But that makes sense to me because that's the goal of cash flowing, right? Is whatever amount of money that you put into the business, you should expect a 15% return. That's the goal, I would say. Why shoot for the 8%? Why not shoot for the 15%? Let's see. What did I talk about? Okay. I think we're ready to move on to rental arbitrage. This is something that I think a lot of people want to hear about. And Tristan, if you could put a timestamp that we're starting to talk about rental arbitrage right now, that'd be awesome. Thank you. So rental arbitrage I feel like it's a buzzword, but it's a really interesting strategy toward working with Airbnbs. It would be, instead of buying a property and putting it on Airbnb, you're renting a property and putting it on Airbnb. That means that you got a landlord to agree to you that you can put their property on Airbnb. And guess what? You don't have to have a down payment. You aren't paying a mortgage. You're just paying the rent, which might mean you could start right now. You might be able to go out by next week and have an Airbnb, which is really appealing because it sounds like a get-rich-quick scheme. People do it, and people are successful at it, and people do it, and have made crazy big businesses off of it. So it's really worth talking about, even if it sounds too good to be true. Okay, let's go into the next slide, or maybe go back. Yeah. Okay, so rental arbitrage. Arbitrage is a term where, let me pull up, I have a note. Arbitrage is a term that means taking something from one industry and selling it for profit in another industry. So that's like arbitrage that's why it's called rental arbitrage, because it's considered taking something that's for rent and turning it into an Airbnb that you profit from. So super different. You can still do your same market analysis. You're still looking at AirDNA. You're still looking at what's the best market. We're still going to analyze 100 properties, but we're analyzing 100 rental properties, not homes to buy. You might still be able to get a new build. You might be able to get that Sleeps 10 house, if you can afford a $3,000 rent or something like that. So that's what's really interesting, is you might be able to essentially get a better property, if you're just using rent. Keep in mind, you still have to qualify for that. You still have to qualify for that property. You should have an income that's like 40 times the rent, 30 to 40 times, depends on the market you're looking at. And that is a good rule of thumb. You should have a good credit score. And that's what might make something like this difficult, but it's really worth looking into. So because you don't own the property and you're renting it out, you have to have an agreement in place with the landlord. And this is where it gets interesting, because maybe you're thinking, who is going to even rent to, like, let me put something on Airbnb that I'm renting? What landlord would do that? That sounds crazy. If I was a landlord, I wouldn't let that happen. There are a lot of different reasons that would make this appealing for the right landlord. You just have to find a couple landlords. We don't have to have 95% of them saying yes, 99% of them saying yes. You just need a couple or one. So what you would do is sweeten the deal with a couple things. Firstly, when you stay at an Airbnb, you get stressed out if you break a light bulb, right? Like anything could happen and you are like, oh no, I do not want to lose my deposit. So a lot of times when people stay in Airbnbs, they actually take really good care of it, if not better than if it was their own home sometimes. So that is certainly positive. It will always look like it is in pristine condition, essentially, because you'll always have cleaners coming in. It will always have the beds made. It will look extremely marketable at any time. So that's always great for the landlord. They basically have a market ready property at any time. Additionally, there are a couple things that you can do when you're presenting this deal to a landlord. You offer profit share. That's about 10% of the profit to the Airbnb, to the landlord, or say I will pay a higher rent. So that depends. Like, look at your business plan and see if it makes more sense to offer one or the other, if our landlord requires one or the other. And then you could offer to rent multiple properties they may have at one time. So if this guy ends up saying yes, ask him about the other properties that they may have, because you already got them to say yes for one. Why not get them to see if you can get 2 or 3 properties out of it too? And that helps them, because now they found renters for their properties. So everybody wins. Another thing is offering to get really good insurance, like a really good renter's insurance, $1 million policy, just to add that extra layer of protection to show that you're serious about this. If you are still feeling like, how is this even going to work? What you do is you file as an LLC. You are running business. You are not showing up as Caroline Ehler. Caroline Ehler is not going to pick up the phone and say, hey, my name's Caroline. I'm looking for a property to be able to put on Airbnb, your property looks great, I'm looking for yours. That's not how it's going to fly. You're going to have an amazing business model, business pitch, and documentation that you're going to present to them. This is a business transaction. This is a business meeting. When you have access to a landlord, you should be setting up a call with them. You, on that call, can show them that you have an LLC, you run an actual business. You can use the term my business, our business, we. You will get to show, on your documents, the letterhead is going to have your business's logo on it. That's how you're going to differentiate yourself from just this concept of going up to somebody and asking for them to Airbnb this. So you'll call up the landlord and you will say, hello, my name is Caroline Ehler from 5-Star Properties based out of DC. We've identified your property as a great property that would do well on Airbnb. Have you ever considered putting it on Airbnb before? Oh, I don't know. It sounds like a lot of work. Well, we have done this before where we have this business model. We identify properties that are being rented out by landlords, and we like to come in, make the property beautiful, and then put it on Airbnb for you. We have done it before. We'd love to do it with your property. Would you be interested in that? And they might say yes or no. Now you're a business proposing an actual business transaction for them and an opportunity. And you can say, well, we offer profit share. What were you thinking? You can negotiate that. Here's our contract. Here, contact our lawyer, whatever. You should probably have a lawyer, you should probably have an accountant for this business. And you will look so professional doing that. You will have your contract. You can purchase rental arbitrage contracts that are lawyer approved online. I feel like every guru sells one. So just go find one. Or have an actual contract lawyer write one up for you, but they're already online. So just go buy one. I don't know how expensive they are. They might be really expensive. So I'm sorry if they are. But you can just take that, change out your logo, and then be able to present that to a lawyer. To a landlord, to be able to say, for 10% profit share, I will be able to rent out this property and I can sublease it on Airbnb and run an Airbnb business on that. So that would be how you would be able to utilize rental arbitrage, and essentially use a sales pitch to do so. So it's very interesting. It might cut on your profit, but then you are only really looking at your expenses as the rent and furnishing the property. What you might even do is get it, because you have a business, you can get a business loan, you can get a business credit card, you can get a credit card that's like 0% interest, and you can put all of the buy all the furniture that you would need for the property, put it on that credit card, pay it off later once you get the profits from the Airbnb coming in. So there's really great opportunity with rental arbitrage. It's definitely difficult because you have to do a lot of calling, a lot of asking landlords, proposing, but it's possible, and it definitely honors people that hustle. So consider it's like $10,000 to start, because you need the deposit, which is 1 month's rent. So you're looking anywhere from like $1,000 to $4,000 probably that you'll need up front. You'll need to be able to pay that first month's rent. So you might need $3,000. So now you're at $6,000. And you probably need another $6,000, $4,000 to $6,000 to furnish the Airbnb. So to consider starting, you might need anywhere from 10 to 15, 10 to 20K to start. So it's pretty low barrier to entry. If you don't have some crazy nest egg to be able to buy a property yourself for any of the different strategies we've ever discussed, including flipping, this might be the way to go if you don't have capital right now. All right, let me look at my time. Okay. All right, we're almost done. Let's see what else you got to talk about. All right, I don't see any questions. And then let's see. You'll also have to get that permit. if you're doing the rental arbitrage, you still have to get the permit. Make sure that that building, before you contact that landlord, make sure that building's going to be able to let you Airbnb that. Do your research before you contact landlords. Don't look stupid on that call. The last thing, I guess, is consider if you need to live near the rental that you have, or if you can work it remotely. You always want to do 3 hours or less driving time, in my opinion, for almost any investment, kind of. Because if you don't have a business model that can afford a property manager in that area, you need to be within driving distance of the property, in my opinion. And that usually looks like 3 hours or less. You don't want to be driving more than 3 hours one way for a property. You really don't. You're going to be sad that you did that. So make sure it's within 3 hours of your home that you can get to whenever you need to. If you have the business model where you built up your business, you can have a property manager in that city, and you are fully capable of leaving and then working it remotely, in my opinion. Like, once you can get a property manager, you're good, and a good one that you like. Consider with Airbnbs, because they are riskier, but they profit more. Typically, they cash flow more. If you buy, you also get to include that appreciation and the depreciation, yeah, of the property. For your taxes, you get to consider the appreciation within your profit, essentially within your equity. If you are doing rental arbitrage, you don't get that. You just get the cash flow. But if you're looking to make more, have more passive income or something like that, passive is used lightly here. You're still working for that money. So it's almost like a combo between, like a hybrid between passive and earned income. But it's certainly worth maybe starting rental arbitrage until you can afford to one day buy and do it yourself, and then consider the fact that you're going to be getting appreciation for that property. You can customize an Airbnb when you buy it. You can rehab it. You can do so many things. So ultimately, what makes it riskier, though, is you will have higher can you survive higher vacancy rates? If you don't have every weekend booked for the entire year, if you don't have half of the weekends booked the entire year, are you going to lose your business? That's something to consider. Let's see. All right, I think that's it. So that is, I think, all I had there on my notes. That's the software we said. Oh yeah, this is the link to this article that I found this on. I think this is really helpful. You can see that the different listing sites to put a short-term rental on. Airbnb, Vrbo, those are the two popular ones. There are some others. Here's the cost it might look like to actually utilize them. Just a nice little comparison chart. You can read more of the article here. It was like how to start an Airbnb or something like that. But this chart is super nice, and definitely helpful when you're thinking about where do I want to put this listing. Okay, as always, literature, people to follow. If you're a person that wants to see visuals and videos and never read like me, you will want to follow those people. They are all really good and all utilize Airbnbs. This guy's mainly Airbnbs. This guy's mainly Airbnbs. I think John's mainly Airbnbs. I don't think Tony and Ryan, they're mainly Airbnbs. Tony and Ryan, I think, do other things. So you'll get a mix. Bigger Pockets, as always, listen to their podcast. Now, if you've thought about real estate investing and you're not listening to the Bigger Pockets YouTube or podcast or something like that, you are doing yourself a disservice, because everyone is getting ahead of you. They are so good at sharing information. They do not gatekeep. They bring on incredible experts, and they speak to the beginner investor all the way to the most seasoned. So you really got to get on that. Use that as a resource. Everything they do is free, essentially. Here's a Bigger Pockets book. Here are 2 books I found on Amazon. No, 3 books I found on Amazon that looked good. I haven't read these, so I can't vouch for them. Sorry. Well, I hope I answered your questions tonight. I hope I answered questions you didn't even know you had. and I hope I gave the information you were looking for. I feel like I talked a lot about just a lot of Airbnb concepts, and hoped I shared good resources like those different websites that you can use, the different software tools. Um, it's really worth looking into because anyone can start with rental arbitrage, and a lot of people can start just with one property. So I really like how accessible it is to everyone. Um, and yeah, I just think it's really cool. It's definitely a fascinating one. It's very popular right now. So it is saturated, be careful, but you can do it. So that concludes our course. We were able to do our overview where we covered a little bit of everything, but ultimately covered the BRRRR method, long-term rentals. We just did short-term rentals, multifamily and commercial, and fix and flips. So we didn't cover everything under the sun. Within real estate, a couple people asked me about wholesaling, a couple people asked me about land, but we'll do that later. I feel like this has gone really well, and I'd absolutely be open to putting on a couple different nights where we can do more topical discussions because we covered a lot. These were huge overview calls, and I feel like we can drill down deeper into more topics, specifically like creative financing or wholesaling or land flipping or something like that, where if you want to get something super specific or topical, like a 1031 exchange or something like that, let me know. And thanks for joining me on this journey. And thanks so much. And I'll see you all at the next one.